In this video, we look at why we as South African citizens should vote. Life in South Africa poses many opportunities and challenges, and we all have different ideas about how to make our country a better place in which to live. In any democracy, the power and right to govern should therefore ultimately lie with the people. During apartheid, millions of black South Africans were forced to live under the decisions of a government for which they were not allowed to vote. The right to vote was perhaps the most important driving force behind the liberation struggle. The principle of one person, one vote is the cornerstone of a democratic and free society and the basis for racial equality. But because we cannot all be politicians, we delegate this representative power to our political leaders. To do this, we vote. When we vote in elections, we choose who we think should represent us and our interests in government. By voting for them, we give permission or mandate to politicians to take decisions on our behalf. That's what we call a representative democracy. All our democratic representatives are expected to respect the country's constitution and represent voters' interests when governing the country. Now, how does voting benefit us ordinary people? It is important to understand that when we vote, we don't just choose a political party or certain politicians, but we influence the future of our country. If your community needed to vote on an issue, but very few people participated in the process, this could result in unpopular decisions being taken. Let's say, for example, there are 1,000 people in your community and only 100 of that 1,000 came out to vote. And of the 100 people who voted, 80 people chose to vote for a very unpopular position. This means that 80% of those who voted supported the unpopular option. If everyone has to abide by the decision, it will not reflect the will of the majority, since less than 10% of the community chose to or were able to vote. So, even when we feel dissatisfied with the choices offered by our political parties, it is still important to vote, even if it is for the least bad option. Declining to vote does not punish candidates or political parties, it simply means that fewer people vote the winner into power. Political leaders and parties make decisions that affect our lives. They formulate and implement policies about issues such as healthcare, education, housing, water and sanitation. They also have an enormous amount of power over the money we pay to government as taxes. Thus, we should think carefully about who we want in positions of power. When we think about who to vote for, we should look at their policies and whether we think the party will be responsive to our interests and needs. It is also important to examine the personal qualities of the candidates and to vote for leaders who we think will obey the laws, spend tax monies wisely, and not use it for themselves or on their friends or family. In a democracy, elections are held regularly. In South Africa, they take place every 5 years. Elections allow us to judge our current government's performance in the previous 5 years. In this way, voting allows us to hold those in government accountable. Accountability involves the obligation of elected political leaders to answer for their decisions. If you approve of the government's performance since the previous election, or it is the only party that you feel happy with, you may want to re-elect the same political party or candidate. If you think the current government did not live up to your expectations and did not improve people's lives or passed policies that are not supported, voting allows you to show your dissatisfaction by choosing another party or candidate. If enough other people feel the same, a different government can come into power. South Africa's political system awards seats in parliament in proportion to the total number of votes a party receives in an election. This means that even parties that obtain a low proportion of the votes can gain representation and influence decision-making processes in parliament. Thus, even if the party that you voted for is not represented in government, it can still use its role in parliament to monitor the ruling party and hold it accountable to what it promised and to the constitution. The majority of people in South Africa have only enjoyed the right to vote since 1994. Before 1994, the apartheid government ran South Africa and many people's voices were not heard. The right to vote was perhaps the most important driving force behind the liberation struggle. The principle of one person, one vote is the cornerstone for any democratic and free society and the basis for racial equality. So, when we vote, we recognize how privileged we as South Africans are to exercise the rights that we fought for so long. The right to vote is entrenched in the Bill of Rights in Chapter 2 of our Constitution. The Constitution affirms that every person from the age of 18 may take part in all South African elections. By voting, you play a part in keeping South Africa's democracy alive and healthy. A successful democracy can only survive and flourish if citizens see their participation in the political process as their responsibility, even if you are not happy with your political leaders. As an individual, voting is the easiest way to contribute to and participate in the democratic process. By taking part in elections, we help our democracy work. Elections make democracy happen. By voting, we safeguard the rights that we hold dear. So why should we vote? We should vote because we care about the future of our country. We should vote to support the current government or, alternatively, to support the opposition if we believe that either a strong opposition or even a change of government is necessary. And we should vote simply because, in a democracy, we can.